Welcome to Launchbase, a fast-paced podcast exploring the latest in tech funding and product launches. In under 30 minutes, we break down key trends, interview industry leaders, and uncover what's driving the next wave of innovation. And now your host, John Radford.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Launchbase. This is the podcast that dives into all things tech in under 30 minutes. I'm your host, John Radford, and each week I chat with individuals who shape the startup, scale-up, and tech landscape. So my question for you today is, are you a massive whopper? If so, the guest today is probably not the guest for you. Today, I'm lucky to be joined by Eddie Whittingham, who is a former police officer, a lawyer turned tech entrepreneur. And Eddie founded the DefenseWorks, which was a cybersecurity company, bootstrapped it from the ground up, and successfully exited to Proofpoint, a NASDAQ-listed company. Eddie is now focused in the Ministry of Work premium co-working space designed to bring together ambitious founders, entrepreneurs, and executives. Eddie also has a no-nonsense, no BS approach to LinkedIn and speaks very openly about his journey and what he does every day. So Eddie, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure, mate. Happy to help.
Yeah, great. How was that introduction? Is there anything you want to add to that about your journey and where you've been? Is there anything I've missed? Any points that you want to add?
No, I don't think so, mate. Happy to delve into some of that in a bit more detail with you.
Yeah, fantastic. I do want to quickly, before we go on, talk about your massive whoppers and all the other sort of stuff. Like at some point, I don't know whether we do that now or when we get to it, sort of what you're doing later on. But yeah, I definitely want to touch upon that. But we'll talk about the exit first, because, you know, a lot of the people who kind of listen to the podcast, a lot of the people that I'm connected with, and I'm sure that you're connected with, who you engage with on a daily basis, and also the people who come to your co-working space are building startups with a view to, I know some of them want to change the world and whatnot, but generally speaking, they want to make some money, right? And they want to exit. That's kind of the goal for a lot of people. Let's talk about that, if you don't mind. Talk us through the journey, how it all started. I'd like the bootstrapping part of it. That's quite exciting for me because, you know, there's different narratives around how to build companies and all that sort of stuff. So talk us through that. And if there's something that comes out of it, I'll kind of dive into it a bit deeper if that's all right.
Of course, yeah. So I started the startup originally in 2016. So prior to that, I'd been a police officer for 9 years. Then I went into law and quite quickly realised I hated it. Spent sort of 2 years to get qualified because I'd spent all the time studying, so I thought I'd better qualify. Mm-hmm. But then within months of qualifying, I decided, like, now I need to escape. If I lock myself into sort of a decent wage, I'm knackered and I'll never do it. Right. So originally, I actually just started selling my time for money, really. So we were providing like corporate debt investigation reports to law firms. That was literally the idea, because quite simply, I'd seen what we were getting charged to do that at the law firm, and I thought, well, I could kind of do that with my background a lot easier. Right. So started out really organically, quickly realised there was a bigger opportunity in cybersecurity, and I hadn't truthfully had any experience in cybersecurity. I just kind of saw the opportunity was there, and I thought if I can learn about it quickly enough, then I can capitalise on that. Yeah. Built that business, which was basically a SaaS business. We had what you call a simulated phishing platform, where we send out phishing emails to members of staff to test how they're responding to them, whether that's going to be a security risk or not, because that's one of the key sort of cybersecurity risks that companies face. And then backing it up then with training. But we basically tried to make the training, I sort of say, the least shit of what training there is, because most online training we all know is absolutely dog shit. Right. Yeah. So our role was to try and make it the least shit. So we had like BBC comedy writers writing comedy sketches. It's a good bar to have. Yeah, exactly. It's a good slogan, actually. Yeah. So we had like BBC comedy writers writing comedy sketches. We had a team of animators making animated like interactive video content and things like that. And yeah, the goal was simply to do that. It was to try and keep it. Yeah, keep the content as good as it could be in the context of its online training about cybersecurity. Long story short, bootstrapped that. I was a sole founder. We got a few lucky breaks along the way. GDPR came around, which massively catapulted our revenue, and then right place market conditions wise for an acquisition. Yeah. A couple of the bigger players in the marketplace didn't have great training, and they were looking for a way to kind of tick a few boxes with their clients and sort of industry reports to say they had bad training. How could they fix that? And then, as I see it, really by acquiring my company, they kind of ticked that box for the next year and kept some customers happy. So it was kind of, for them, a bit of a no-brainer acquisition, for me, and a no-brainer sale, really. Cool. There's a couple of bits that I've just struck a few things in me there. The one you just said, you got a couple of lucky breaks.
I'm a bit of a believer that sort of luck is when hard work kind of meets preparation. And I don't know where you sit on this. And like, there's a lot of narrative about kind of the grind is dead and it's all about work-life balance and all that sort of stuff. Where do you sit on this? I kind of feel like if you're a founder, it's all about the grind, and like luck is what happens when you work hard and you make the luck, as it were. And
I agree. I think it's interesting. Like, I think luck's still an important part, right? I think to be like in inverted commas successful, you need like to work extremely hard, undoubtedly. You need like some natural talent. Like, I was able to create that content in a way and bootstrap it in a way that meant it was successful. Not everyone could have done that. But then the third bit that people don't normally like to admit to because it diminishes their achievements is luck. But I agree, without those other two, you're never going to benefit from the luck. So you've got to put yourself in the position to benefit from the luck, that if that luck comes around. In my case, it was market conditions.
Yeah.
So
sort of make luck easy to find you, if that makes sense.
I think so. And like, mate, the whole work life thing is a complete load of bollocks. Like, if you're starting a business, you have to work incredibly hard.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence that these people on the sort of the influencer arc, they work really hard, they get really successful, then in order for them to be able to continue selling their courses and books, they tell you it's not worth risking your work-life balance for, even though that's what they did to get to the place they're at now.
Right.
Having said that, there's also the counter argument to that just because you work hard does not mean you might be successful. You might be,
because you can work stupid, can't you? You've got to work smart as well.
Quite, yeah. And so, like, you know, people will have worked a lot harder than me and made a lot less money, but that's why the luck came into it, I think.
Yeah. But so on that, going back to the start of that, like, it didn't sound like it didn't have the sort of traditional founder market fit type thing in terms of you'd worked at like a cybersecurity company for 10 years and really learned your craft and all that sort of stuff. You just sort of gradually went into it. And talk us through that, and where you sit on that, how important it is, you know, because you work with investors and all that sort of stuff now on the other side.
I think it's one of them like myths sometimes that you can do that, or that every business does that. Fundamentally, business is just about spotting an opportunity, isn't it? Mm-hmm. In my case, I was providing those services to the law firms. I was basically making a very small wage doing that, and I kind of was like, that's not really what I want to do either. Yeah. And then I'd seen someone talk about the idea of selling software as a service rather than selling the time, and I was like, that's interesting, and that's what triggered me to go. Literally from that talk, I went away to my desk and I scribbled down anything in my skill set that I had at that stage, and at the time, the things that I did have in my skill set were I'd done like a lot of fraud investigations from the police at the law firm, albeit I'd only been there 2 years. I was involved in like quite a lot of policy stuff for like anti-fraud and anti-bribery laws and stuff like that, and fraud. I figured that initially maybe the service would be a thing to help businesses prevent fraud. Like, the numbers were all there, like, oh, fraud's really bad, scary and all this, but fundamentally, was there a big, I guess, a trigger pain point for someone to buy a service? But originally, I started out with like this idea on paper of offering a whole plethora of services to help businesses reduce fraud. There was going to be like a policy management tool. There was going to be online training. There was going to be a helpline. There was going to be like another helpline where you could ring up and like shop somebody if you thought they were being fraudsters. All this kind of stuff that I just dreamt up. And then very quickly, when I started to try and sell it, because that's the fucking test, right? If you cannot sell something, you have a hobby, not a business.
Correct.
When I started to try and sell it, no one was interested in all of that shit. But what they were interested in, they were saying, actually, I could do some training to teach my staff around this, this, and this. And that became the cybersecurity angle.
So many familiar stories. Like, there's a pivot in there somewhere then, isn't there?
100%.
And then it sounds like, would you say that potentially you took too long to get to that learning part?
No, I don't think so. Because really, the reality of my journey on that first year was I started in the February 2016.
Yeah.
Doing that was when I was doing the work with the law firms. Come the June, July, I was starting to think about this fraud idea. And then come the end of that year, we were doing the cybersecurity training with our first customers. So it probably moved quite quick. Didn't feel probably like it at the time, but if I look back now...
I've seen people take 6 months to not even build an MVP, so...
Well, so funnily enough, I was chatting to this about someone yesterday where I think I sold in May 2020. I've got a conversation in my LinkedIn with somebody who was building a disruptive startup in 2021. We've got a long sort of email, LinkedIn thread, and they still haven't launched it. And on there, I just saw them do a post about they're doing a beta launch in 2025. I'm like, fucking hell, mate! Like 4 years ago, like just fucking Because the reality is, it's probably a shit idea.
Correct. So as soon as you launch it, unfortunately, the bubble's going to burst, and
yes, correct. But you can pretend you're a tech entrepreneur in the meantime. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and you can go on podcasts like these and stuff like that. So let's go through to you launched it, you got customer feedback, which is all of the lessons that we all hear about and all that sort of stuff. But you've actually exited a business. So that's something I'd like to focus on, actually, because we know about all of the, customer feedback stuff. That's all great. You obviously did it. You built the business, scaled it to how many people?
Staff wise, we had, I think at the largest we were 10, but I think when we sold it, we were like 8, I think.
Okay, so nice. So sort of still on
nice
lean
size.
Yeah, great. So how did the acquisition happen? Did you kind of actively, go out and look for a buyer, or did someone come to you?
Yeah, we'd made some like deliberate efforts to kind of get noticed in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. One of which was basically in the industry we were in. It was almost like there's a thing called Gartner Peer Insights, which was like a Trustpilot equivalent. You can pay to be on Gartner and be in like their magic quadrant, which says you're a thought leader and all this sort of shit. Sure. But it was like $50,000 a year, and I wasn't paying it. Yeah. So we ended up going on their like Gartner Peer Insights platform on the basis that it was just you could get your customers to leave reviews and it was free. It didn't cost anything. So we basically set up like a whole marketing campaign really to our current customer base to say like, are you happy with our services? If you are, please leave us a review. But we had like a whole email series followed by the customer account managers would reach out, and then if they didn't like respond to that, then I'd reach out because I'd obviously onboarded a lot of these customers. Sure. And we sort of in the space of 3 months went from like 0 to over 100 5-star reviews on this platform. And at the time, like part of that was we were going to use that for our own marketing, but it was also just to sort of start to get a little bit noticed. Mm-hmm. It probably happened then a lot quicker than I anticipated it would, because not long after we had like 2 of the big American players sniffing around. One of them wanted to license our content, the other one wanted to acquire us, but that was just literally a LinkedIn message.
Wow.
From both of them, actually. It was just a LinkedIn, not connected to, from the general manager of the division in Proofpoint saying, would you be interested in a collaboration? And obviously I sort of just naively went into started that process off and said, well, yeah, let's have a chat and see where it leads. And it
led to an exit.
Yeah.
And talk us through that. Any stumbling blocks, any problems, any lessons learned?
Do you know what? Like, I hear a lot of like horror stories of exits, and I have to say mine was like relatively painless. There was the usual like not hearing back from a while, blah de blah. Like I think they originally reached out in the August, and I sold in the May, so it's still a relatively quick timeline. Yeah. But there were still periods in that, particularly at the start, where it was a will they, won't they, are they interested? They'd sort of danced around valuation quite a lot, and then they were due to fly out to come to see us in Manchester, and they wanted to meet the team, and I sort of politely but firmly emailed them on the sort of the day before they were due to fly out saying like, look, if we're not going to even get a ballpark figure in mind.
Yeah, so who blinks first on that one? Did you get the number out of them?
Yeah, we got like some assurances that we would be in the same game at least. Right. Yeah. Because I was like, my fear at the time was we were such a small team. If I suddenly go, oh, by the way, guys, like let's have a look, let's all chat to these Americans. My whole team are going to like shit themselves.
Yeah.
Because
they're going to be gone in 6 months, kind of.
Well, they're going to think I'm trying to sell the company, and truthfully, at that point, wasn't. I was looking at the what opportunities there are, but I didn't want someone just to come in, really upset the dynamics of the team, and then them give me a derisory offer of £1 million and me say, well, that was a waste of time, and I've upset my team as well. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it was kind of like that. There was that, but generally the process was pretty straightforward, and actually the acquiring company Proofpoint were really good and really fair. There wasn't sort of loads of smoke and mirrors. There's the usual negotiation tactics. It was maybe I'm looking back at it. It feels a lot easier than it was. I don't know.
Do you have anyone advising you on that?
A couple of people, but not massively. I had like financial advice. and a few people I would trust for advice, but I wouldn't we didn't have like an exit strategist or anything like that. It was just,
I get a feeling that I might be reading between the lines a little bit here, that you're not massively big on a lot of these coaches and strategists and experts. And
it depends on it. I think the problem is anyone can be an expert these days. Like all they need to do is have some relatively polished content, and all of a sudden we believe them.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not fully sold on it, and you know what, that comes through my own lived experience of it, because when I first started my business, and I say this a lot actually, I think when people first start the business, they're in a uniquely vulnerable position, and I think it's an industry that gets preyed upon. So when I first started my business, I had a guy who was introduced to me as like a mentor. He did like a month's free mentoring with me, and I was sort of not in awe of him at the time, but I remember thinking, oh, he's really helpful. And then he ended up then asking for $2,500 a month and 10% of my business. And I was like, with respect, mate, you haven't fucking done anything. You've been a senior leader at a respect. But you've not done it. You've not built from 0 to $1 million or whatever.
Yeah.
So you've got no credibility in my eyes. Yes, you've been a VP at a company that's turned over 10 million, but a lot of people can do that. A lot of people can't go from 0 to whatever.
Absolutely.
Like and they're very different skill sets. It's not to diminish him. He was clearly very good at what he did, but he wasn't good at what I needed. And so that's the bit that pisses me off. I think there's a lot of people who prey upon startups because, like I say, you're uniquely vulnerable and you're probably more open to that. So I get a bit pissed off with that whole thing.
Yeah, no, fair dues. So you exited your company, there would have been an earn-out period or something like that, I'm assuming, but then that allowed you to, move forward to present day, the Ministry of Work, which looks amazing, by the way. You know, I've seen it all, and you've done a brilliant job. Talk us through that. Talk us through your vision and where you're at, and you know what the plans are.
Yeah, so it's a kind of weird thing. You obviously sell a business, and you're like, right, now what?
What next?
Yeah, a little bit, and obviously it was a life-changing amount of money, and I could sit and do nothing. Invariably, the people who think, oh, you go sit on a beach, are the people who won't sell a business. It's not in your nature, right?
No,
you want to still achieve stuff. So I'd sort of said for a long time to my wife, I was like, I think a co-working space in the suburbs would work really well. Only if it's in a cool building, because you've still got to compete with the lure and the pull of a city centre.
Sure.
And I guess when I obviously had then the capital to sort of execute on that idea probably span around in my head a little bit more. And so I was find myself looking on like Commercial Rightmove and so on and so on. And then I saw this place come up for sale. It was an old chapel derelict, basically. And I went for a look around, which is the fatal mistake you should never do, particularly if you've got sort of money burning a hole in your pocket.
Why is that? Because you're going to fall in love and then that's it?
Yeah. And I sort of walked in, and I brought a guy to look around it with me, who was a builder who I sort of trusted his opinion on. And he's like, yeah, this is a fucking shithole. It's going to need a lot of work. And then I sort of rang my wife sheepishly and said, I think I've just bought an old church. It's one of them places you can see past it's the usual kind of cliche you get on fucking grand designs in it, but you could sort of see the bones were good, and if I could pull it off. I looked at the catchment area. I did my research obviously before doing anything rash, but I looked at the catchment area and thought, yeah, even if it's a sort of a very traditional co-working space, it'll do well. It's not a big site. We've only got we've got 36 desks upstairs and 8 private offices, so it's not a 20,000 square foot building or anything. It's 5,000 square foot. So I was like, I'm pretty confident that this could be both a great asset for me to own, because it's going to appreciate in value, right? It's an investment, but also a great income, because it'll give me a monthly income, and more probably importantly at that stage, like a purpose. Because what I didn't want to do is just kind of struggle around. You know, you've gone from having a team, and then you leave that team, and then you're on your own again, and it's kind of a strange place to be. So it served a few purposes for me. It's an income, it's an asset, but it's also given me a real purpose. So
I posted about purpose yesterday, because it's one of my 4 Ps. That purpose there, talk us through what the real kind of purpose and the passion of like Ministry of Work is, and why it exists, and why it's sort of different to
so interesting. A year ago, it started out just as like an alternative to co-working in the city centre.
Sure.
What's been really interesting the last year, and it's really helped hone and now focus my purpose even more so, because we're outside the city centre, we've actually attracted a different crowd. Now, my experience of city centre co-working is it's mainly young professionals, often in the very creative space.
Yes.
here, because of where we are, we've attracted a slightly older crowd, potentially a little bit more serious or a bit further along in their journey. And invariably, they've been business leaders or founders. So that's kind of happened organically.
Why do you think that is? Just because they can't be asked commuting into the centre?
I think so, truthfully. Like, I'm a bit old now, I'm 39, I've got 2 kids. I can't be asked going into town every day. Yeah. And that's pretty much almost the motto of the building.
Yeah.
But then, so that's happened this last year. And then, meanwhile, I've sort of seen this new trend in London called a work club, where it's like combining the sort of social elements, but also with somewhere to actually work. And then interestingly, saw a guy then lift that from London and apply it to Southampton, and he's got a really great booming ecosystem. He's got like 120 odd members or whatever he's at now, and it's like really powerful. And so I've been looking at that from afar, from like the London model, and saying, well, we're sort of organically doing that. Maybe we should lean fully into it. So that's what we're doing from the start of this year. In 2025, we're leaning massively into the idea of this work club. So it's like a nuanced and more intentional direction. So rather than just be co-working for anybody, like day passes and all that sort of stuff, we are now strictly only for ambitious founders and business leaders. And I say that in the nicest possible way, not even founders at super early stage. If you're a super early stage founder, there are loads of really great free programs in the city centre run by NatWest, Barclays, and various other organisations that will help you get your idea from 0 to 10 grand a month. But what we are focusing on is the ones who are trying to get to 1, 2, 3 million turnover.
Yeah, okay.
And try and attract that, because that's where, in my eyes, the sort of level of support drops off.
Yeah, it does.
The idea is we're way more intentional into now who we let in the building.
Okay.
How
are you qualifying that then?
It's looking at basically baseline qualification would be revenue and team numbers in the team, but not strictly, because there's always going to be the people who might only be turning out 50 grand, but actually they're on a fast track scale to getting big quick. But generally that's the sort of baseline. And then the power of that becomes you get people with the same challenges in the same building, and there's all sorts of really cool stuff happens, whether that's collaboration, whether that's work passing around, or whether that's just knowledge sharing. And that's where it's quite exciting. And it's still quite an unusual thing to happen. So we're still early in that. We only launched that like literally a week ago. We've had five people join that work club already. I'm confident we'll get that to 50 by the end of the year. That's like my sort of medium goal, but my stretch goal is to try and get to 100 as quickly as we can, because I think if we do that, we've got this like amazing self-sustaining ecosystem of really interesting businesses.
Yeah, right. Businesses who want to get involved in that, what sort of support can they expect if they get in?
Sure. I think it's a threefold benefit, really, as I see it. You get exclusive access to the space. It's a premium workspace, more almost of like a hospitality kind of led environment than a workspace one. So it's access to that. You can access it 24/7. You get meeting rooms and you get conference rooms and all that sort of stuff. That's the stuff you expect of any co-working space, right? But I think the benefit then comes in the second and the third part. So the second part being that exclusive community, access to being amongst those like-minded people. So we've had like a member join. She actually, she's in Preston, so it's a little bit further out of the initial catchment area than I envisaged. But she wanted to join because she fundamentally wants to surround herself with people who are dreaming a bit bigger. She's got an MD in place in the business, but she wants to surround herself by this, not the more visionary people, but people who are going to make her dream. Rather than, she turns over £1 million. Well, she wants to get to 10 million quid. Her MD might want to just get to 2 million.
Yeah.
So it's trying to find that. The people who are going to challenge you. And I think for me, it's like the idea of I want to always be the thickest person in the room. And I think if you've got that mentality, you're going to surround yourself by people who inspire you and push you on and on and on.
Yeah, great mentality.
So the community is...
Steve Jobs' hiring methodology was that, I want to hire people smarter than me because they push me on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that community, that's really powerful. But then the bit that then like almost stokes the value from the community is like the events that we run, whether that can be like the informal breakfast one, lunch club, or so they're like the social value ones. Sure. But then we also have like the educational value and the support value. So we'll have the shared knowledge founders talks that we do throughout the building. We'll invite experts in to come and deliver their knowledge on a strictly no sales base. It has to be value led. And then also things like we have a think tank, so a bit of like a round table group where people bring a problem. We'll all try and flesh through it in a really small group. So kind of like a building where it's like Chatham House rules, no selling, trustworthy. You can share your deepest, darkest problems about your business and you'll get some sometimes brutally frank but needed advice as well.
What you need.
Yeah, 100%. You can't. I would say like you can't go into your workspace and start talking with your staff about how many people you're going to need to make redundant before the end of the year, because you can't have that conversation. You can have that here, and it happens.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think so.
So going from 1 to 10 million is quite a big jump, and oftentimes people need or want a VC capital to kind of accelerate that. Do you have kind of a network of VCs that people can kind of tap into, or is that not really part of what you guys do? Or?
Yeah, we're really well connected with the VCs here in Manchester and various sort of angels as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's our focus though. I think there's a lot of that in town already.
Yeah.
We're more focused on like helping the businesses build up and have the right support network from the people, the like-minded people almost. But yeah, certainly like we've got quite a few here who've been raising some serious numbers.
You're a bootstrap founder to exit.
Yeah.
Where do you sit on the kind of bootstrap versus raising capital debate?
It totally depends. I used to be fiercely against investment, truthfully.
Yeah.
But that's because I didn't get it. I've since had a business that we've had investment for, and there's a right place and a right time. If you can avoid it, then bootstrap it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the value of my business when I sold it was because I owned 100% of the shares. So actually, a relatively like modest, in inverted commas, sale was
Big.
tremendous for me.
Yes.
But to get that same money out, if we'd have had investment, I'd have had to sell it for like 5 times as much. So it depends. But there are a lot of businesses that genuinely can't scale without real investment.
Yeah.
And you also don't want to miss an opportunity by being anti-investment. So I've probably changed my tune on it a little bit. I used to be very sort of anti it, but I totally get it now.
Yeah, I think it is it depends thing, but I'm a fan of that kind of chasing capital once you've got a little bit of something, and there's tools out there now to sort of help you build like early. If we're talking purely like sort of tech products and that sort of stuff, you can get that early validation pretty quickly. So you shouldn't be sort of chasing investment from day one.
No.
Stuff like it's like wasting your time.
Yeah,
just
I see that a
something.
lot. Yeah.
If you haven't got like a few grand to put in your pocket, then probably you're in the wrong game. That's my harsh opinion.
No, I think you're right, and I think like ultimately, and if you're sort of being frustrated by that, you need to find a way to get a few grand, and that might be you're gonna have to go and Uber for a few nights a week for 2 years.
Save up if you're really that passionate about it. I reckon you can make it happen.
And like the bootstrap thing isn't easy. Like, so I quit the law firm. I then managed to get some like weekend work. It was relatively decent paid work, but I was working Monday to Friday in the business, and then at the weekend I was doing the work, like paid work. So it was a pain in the ass, and I worked really hard. And that's the bit that people sometimes forget from people's journeys. It's like it was a fucking slog, and like there was no guarantee I would have got to the end either. I just was putting one foot in front of the other with the best of intentions, and that's sometimes it as well. One foot in front of the other. That's a good one. There's a good book on that as well, though, because that's exactly what it is. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Eddie, we're getting close to the end of our time. I'd like to sum up by seeing if there's you've just given a little nugget there, but any other advice for sort of, let's talk about say early to mid-stage startups and scale-ups. What sort of advice, if you're going from that kind of early to mid-stage? I think fundamentally, wherever you are based, it's trying to find that network of other people who get it. There's no point surrounding yourself in a room of other people who are losing. You need to be around other people who actually are trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve in probably in a different space, because you'll learn from them, but you'll also be inspired from them, and you'll also like dream a little bit bigger, because you're not gonna reach the moon if you're only shooting for somewhere half between. You need to shoot beyond the moon, and you'll probably land at the moon. It's that kind of vibe. So I'm seeing that value firsthand here. I saw that value firsthand when I joined an accelerator program when I first started my business, because I literally had no experience in business. So I was learning from people ahead of me. And then the level we get in, the businesses that we get in here, it's like you need to have people ahead of you to learn from. There's no point, sitting still and expecting the same results. Eddie, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Eddie from Ministry of Work. And if you are looking for a co-working space just outside of town in Manchester, this is your guy. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Launchbase. If you like this, please do subscribe, leave us a review, and we will see you on the next one. Cheers, Eddie.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Launchbase. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share. Stay tuned for more insights on tech, funding, and product launches. See you next time.